Okay, the paper is called Economics and Climate Justice Activism, Assessing the Financial Impact of the Fossil Fuel Divestment Movement. It's co-authored by myself, Bob Pollin, and Tyler Hansen. Tyler is a finishing PhD student here at UMass who will be joining the Technical University of Denmark in a few months. So the paper is asking the question, we have a global fossil fuel divestment movement that is fighting climate change. That's the point. And the way they're fighting climate change is attacking the fossil fuel multinational corporations. Why? Because burning fossil fuels is the primary cause, the primary driver causing climate change. The divestment movement began in 2011, and for a good decade has been the primary political organizing tool around stopping fossil fuel consumption and therefore fighting climate change. The movement has really two purposes. One, to inflict damage on the reputation of fossil fuel companies, their social license to operate, and two, to inflict financial damage, to squeeze the industry, as Bill McKibben said, who was a leader of the movement. And our aim is to assess the degree to which the fossil fuel divestment movement has been successful in, quote, squeezing the industry, and therefore fighting climate change through this tactic. What we've found is that the fossil fuel divestment movement has not been successful in squeezing the industry. The aim of the fossil fuel divestment movement is simple, is to get people who are ethically motivated to sell their shares of stock in fossil fuel companies, or if they own bonds, to sell the bonds. So they're operating through financial markets, not goods markets. They're not saying stop consuming fossil fuels. They're saying we're selling our ownership shares in the fossil fuel company. Okay, why did we conclude that this wasn't successful? Number one, we looked at descriptive evidence on the magnitude of the fossil fuel divestment campaign after a full decade of very, very intense activity. And what we found is that the level of divestment remains minuscule. That if we add up all the divestment activity, it's about $36 billion in a with private fossil fuel companies market value at about $5 trillion. And even of that 36 billion, only about 11 billion are full divestments. So that's 0.02% of the market value of fossil fuel companies. The other 23 billion are partial divestments. So the impact in terms of magnitude has been small. Secondly, we did an econometric modeling exercise in which we examined the times at which fossil fuel divestment activity has taken place, and we looked at whether it has affected the share prices of the fossil fuel companies. And the results were, with respect to oil and gas fossil fuel companies, no impact whatsoever. And with coal, maybe you get a tiny impact. So that's basically how we concluded that this project has been very good in inspiring people to think about climate change and what to do, but has not been successful in inflicting harm on the industry. Now, the intuition behind all this is straightforward. Number one, as we said, for this to be successful, the magnitude has to be much, much bigger than 1/10 or so of 1% of the whole industry. So in terms of our descriptive evidence, that's clear that it's not going to succeed. But then even more fundamentally, analytically, what are we talking about? We're talking about people who are ethically motivated, or institutions or entities, pension funds, churches, ethically motivated holders of these assets to sell. So they're selling to people who are not ethically motivated, who are profit motivated. So they're perfectly willing, the people who are profit motivated, perfectly willing to buy these assets as long as the companies are making money. So as long as the fossil fuel divestment campaign wasn't directly attacking the company's sale of fossil fuels, then you can always find somebody who's willing to buy the shares. So that's really the conclusion of the paper. Useful, hopefully, because as we know, we are facing a severe climate crisis. And so, the question is, what do we do to try to stabilize the climate and allow human life on Earth to continue? Rather significant question. So the significance of the paper is that we have people mobilized, people who care across the globe, and they have been focused to a significant extent on a tactic, divestment campaigns, that doesn't do the job. So that the point of the paper is that, well, look, let's mobilize around and use tactics that are going to actually be impactful. Let's use that same energy to undertake other tactics. Yes, we can still inflict damage on the company's reputations. That's important, but we have to hit the companies where it really hurts. That is, they have to be able to force them to stop selling and making money off of selling fossil fuels, oil, coal, and natural gas. So the contribution of the paper, hopefully, is to get people to think, well, let's get at these companies in the product market, in the goods market. That is, let's just say, force entities to stop buying oil, coal, and natural gas to produce energy, as opposed to getting all involved in financial markets and stock prices. So the implication is that we need to, really focus on positive projects that will really make a difference. And I think not because of our paper, though maybe we've made a small contribution, but we have seen a shift, and that is important. And my own research and Tyler Hansen's own research is focusing on these other sets of questions. So for example, how do we move the globe onto a clean energy trajectory as opposed to fossil fuels? How do we force entities to stop burning oil, coal, and natural gas? If we look at our institution, UMass, which, by the way, was one of the first universities to divest from fossil fuels, our own students have shifted their tactics to say UMass has to stop burning oil, coal, and natural gas. They have to stop emitting CO2, and that's the point. So, and UMass and other institutions, other universities are doing that. And my own research is about focusing on building a clean energy system, doing it in a way that enables a just transition for workers and communities that are dependent on fossil fuels, and doing it in a way that is consistent with expanding job creation. Tyler Hansen's work, his dissertation, which is almost done, is focused on what's with these companies, what's going to happen to the fossil fuel companies, why aren't they shifting into clean energy, which logically you would think they should.